Hi everybody, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm Sam Davies, the CEO of Referrals, and I'm going to be doing this webinar with our Senior Business Development Manager, Richard O'Donovan. Over to you.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming in today.
Great. So what we're going to be looking at today, the 3 psychological principles to make referrals successful. And in terms of what we'll be covering, firstly, why behavioral psychology is important for referrals. There's 3 sort of key psychological models that are relevant for referrals and how Referrals have addressed those principles in its methodology and the way in which it built the platform. And then Rich is going to sort of give you 5 key takeaways on how to use psychology to make referrals work within your organization.
So just looking at why behavioral psychology matters. So talent acquisition largely know the why when it comes to referrals. The statistics that surround them, such as more likely to be hired, higher retention rates, faster time to hire, are all very compelling and kind of well worth trying to achieve. But a lot of this comes down to how can you get your employees engaged in a program? How can you keep that engagement lasting over time? So understanding the 3 core principles of behavioral psychology we'll be covering today are so important when it comes to getting a successful program kind of up and running in your business.
So the first model that I'm going to look at is the hook model. And this is NEIA's 4-step model, which it's not specifically for referrals, but it's designed to help businesses build sort of habit-forming products for consumers. And the first element of this is the trigger. So this is building a clear and simple trigger to encourage an employee or a consumer to take an action. The action, again, it's making this as clear as possible, explaining what the expected behavior is that will result in a reward, making that really clear to the individual. And there are 3 types of rewards, these variable rewards. The first one is reward of the tribe. And this is sort of looking at social rewards based on connection and acceptance, rewards of the hunt, which is sort of a material reward or resource, and rewards of the self, which is sort of personal gratification in the form of mastery of self-realization. I'll come on to what that means. It's just sort of a clever way of saying sort of stuff like trading, etc. And then the final, the 4th limb to this is investment. So creating actions to improve future engagement. So how does the hook model work for referrals then? Well, let's start with trigger. So we talked about the idea it needs to be clear and simple trigger to encourage an action. So the way we deal with this on our platform is we allow employees to connect their networks with the platform. We match their connections to live job vacancies and they get a notification saying, your connection, Jack, has been matched to this job. Click here to refer. So that's just an example of how you make that trigger really clear, really simple, and easy to action. And then when it comes to the action piece, so if we're thinking about how we explain the behavior expected for the reward, so they know to take that action, it makes it really important on the platform or in your referral scheme, but I'll explain how we do it on our platform, to explain what they get in return for that action. So for example, on our platform, we would explain on the dashboard that they get X amount of raffle tickets for referrals, for applications, for interviews, and for hires. And again, that would be set out specifically on the leaderboard page as well. But that can be done manually, of course, but really making it clear what it is that they will get in return for the action that you're asking them to take. And then moving on to the variable rewards, this is why running focus groups is a key part of our methodology, but I think it's critical for any organization to understand and identify what rewards motivate employees. There are 3 limbs, as we talked about on the previous page. Rewards of the tribe, this is where the gamification and leaderboards or group rewards such as team nights out really make a difference. And that's why on our platform you have referee leaderboards, whether it be for the raffles or the points. And then rewards of the hunt. So this would be stuff like money or gym memberships or vouchers, extra holidays, for example. But but just to give you an example of why these focus groups are important, we discovered for one of our clients that through running them, that actually what would motivate them most would be associated with the reward of the hunt, receiving coffee vouchers. You know, they were constantly on the move. Coffee was something they were regularly having to pick up and spend money on. So actually that would be something that would motivate them. And then the final one's reward of the self. This is stuff around free training, days off for personal study. And this is something that we're seeing, I think, of growing importance for employees, and becoming a more motivating factor in making sort of reward schemes work.
But this was the most interesting one from kind of talking to any companies that we work with and doing these focus groups, that the preconceived idea of an employee referral scheme is a set monetary amount at some point, kind of be it past a hire or past probation. But it's just never been challenged and never looked at that closely. So it's amazing how just speaking to your employees and kind of breaking that idea of possibly lower value, higher frequency rewards, and just being able to adapt and customize it as you actually move through the program can have such a huge difference, while ultimately kind of saving money as opposed to still having to pay out, you know, sometimes as high as 3,000 or 5,000 for that hire.
Absolutely, no, I completely agree. And actually, I think like allowing them the headspace to think of what else they might want, whether it be rewards of the self, rewards of the hunt, and sort of, you know, blue sky thinking with them as to what works makes a big difference. And then investment. So this is again where the leaderboards, the raffle tickets, the points really come into play and work, because they encourage employees to sort of repeatedly take that action to gather more points and better rewards. And in fact, it often leads to them taking, you know, that action at a greater intensity from that investment perspective as well. So, you know, some interesting principles, and when you actually sort of apply each of them to the methodology you take when it comes to referrals, you do see a big impact on the engagement from employees. So worth looking at.
So I'll be just looking at the commitment principle. So as Sam was looking at kind of getting employees engaged and working into a program, the commitment principle again looks at how to keep that engagement running and keep people coming back, repeating the actions. So this is largely broken into 3 different parts. So the first being reciprocal behavior. So if positive behavior from your employee is immediately rewarded, they're much more likely to repeat that behavior. Now, it's kind of difficult to think when you look at rewards and using that word, but if you look back at what Sam was saying, such as raffle tickets, just celebrating that success, showing it on the leaderboard, just having the idea that what your actions are being kind of directly recognized will keep the engagement going from the start. And employees are very much wired to return favors, pay back debts, just the way kind of humans are wired to do it. So it really helps being able to reward this and see it on the platform. Now, consistency, getting employees to commit to something relatively small. So on our platform, the first instance would be getting them to sync their connections. So getting them to sync their connections, we can then reward this activity, show them moving onto the platform, and it gives a far greater chance that they will move on to the next step, which will be to start making those referrals, which again in turn are rewarded, recognized, celebrated. So just building that loop, that they have humans themselves have a deep need to be consistent. So once we publicly committed to something, we're much more likely to deliver on it. And then lastly, social proof. So gamification and leaderboards help hugely again, so your employees can see what other employees are doing, how they're engaging, and this will then influence them to do the same. So all the leaderboards are shared in the dashboard in our platform, and we send it out in newsletters, again, just to make sure everyone is aware of it. And humans are inclined what they observe others to be doing. So once you celebrate these successes, like raffles being won, rewards going out to people, people will then in turn kind of be more engaged. And it again just comes into looking at how many people you can get to engage in a platform or in a program. One of the consistent things for us is just the amount of people who actually will make referrals. Even some companies who are getting 10, 20% of their annual hires through a referral program, they'll find that the amount of employees who actually engage could be, 5–10%. It's often the same people who make referrals over and over. Not that there's anything hugely wrong, but you kind of run into problems such as, more of the same and kind of that, and lack of diversity in your programs. So again, just looking to do it this way is a great way to encourage kind of a much greater experience, more people engaging, more diversity as well through it.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think just to add to that, particularly the consistency point, we do see that, don't we? When, we're not asking much, but when, if we get them to sign up, get them onboarded and they connect their networks, the reason they do that, of course, is because the system then starts matching their connections to live job vacancies. But once they've gone through that process, we actually see a far more engaged workforce. And to Richard's point, often the participation is really low within sort of employee referral schemes. But once they've done that first step, we do see the knock-on effect. And it's interesting to see how this commitment principle works in practice and is effective. So great. Anything on that before I move on, Rich?
No, that's it.
Great. So the third key psychological principle that I want to look at is what's called the incentive theory. So this is slightly different to the previous two models. So it doesn't focus on intrinsic forces behind motivation. This is more around sort of the processes people are pulled towards because they lead to rewards. And there are lots of principles when it comes to incentive theory, but the three most relevant for referrals are the ones that I'm going to touch on here. So first one being, incentives are only powerful if the individual places importance on the reward. And that might seem obvious, but actually when you think about the fact that most referral schemes just take a blanket approach, which is you get a sort of financial bonus in return for what you've done, actually, we're not taking that time a lot of the time to sort of think about, do they place importance on that? Do they care about that financial reward? Would they place importance more on something else? Which again, and I've said it a few times today, but it's why those focus groups are so important at the beginning, to learn about what motivates each individual team or individual. Now, obviously, we're not all the same. We can be quite different. So it's important to have some optionality in there as well. But really important to start with that as a principle. And rewards have to be obtainable in order to be motivating. So this is why, large scale monetary rewards, sort of 6 to 9 months down the line, when somebody's hired or passes probation, potentially don't work as well as other rewards might do. And that's around the fact that they don't feel obtainable. They're not very immediate, they're quite far off. And if we looked at this slightly differently, and we looked at the idea that, okay, if we ran raffles or points-based leaderboards and there was a prize at the end of a month, we made that more immediate, that feels more obtainable, and therefore is more motivating. So, we really looked at that psychological principle to build our gamification and our rewards process, and it really does work. So it's something worth looking at. And then the final piece here is reinforcement. So the way this is defined in the incentive theory is any stimulus change that follows an action/response that increases the rate and intensity of occurrence of the same action/response. So let's apply that to referrals. So this is why transparency for employees on how many raffle tickets, points they've accrued for the different actions which lead to that hire, the referral, the application, the interview, the eventual hire, and where they sit on the leaderboard compared to their peers. That positive feeling of receiving a reward for an action and or winning against peers increases the likelihood of that behavior going up in intensity and being repeated. So three really, really important principles that I think are paramount when you're considering how to sort of bring in a reward strategy and make that work for your employees.
So from all this, looking at 5 key takeaways. So if you're attempting any sort of mass engagement with your workforce, you're going to need to take the time to really understand kind of what motivates them, get a better understanding of the reasons why they wouldn't participate, why they've been slow to in the past, and then look to reward, engage, motivate them kind of as they would like to see the best results. You need to take the time to build a reward strategy that encompasses what we saw today of, rewards of the tribe, the hunt, and the self. So on our platform, we've centralized the gamification and allowed you to make changes to this, customize it, even small things like increase prizes for difficult to fill roles, but just having the ability and kind of this ability to step back, look at the program as a whole and how you reward it is so important. Automation is critical. Making referrals work is kind of a big enough job, and to keep everything running and being able to focus on the important bits, like finding out again how your employees want to interact with it, you need to be able to automate a lot of it to really get the best out of the system. Building a strong employer brand can be achieved through consistency. So again, recognizing the individual actions that go towards making referrals, rewarding at these steps, celebrating that success, communicating with your employees, just keeping the weekly, monthly newsletter going. All of this is just so vital to be able to keep this running, for years to come, as opposed to, what we see a lot of times is putting a new monetary bonus behind it, maybe making it from 1,000 to 2,000. You'll see a spike for maybe 2 to 3 months, but then that'll all kind of tail off again, and you'll kind of revert back to looking again how to make changes. So just building that consistency, making it really part of the employer brand. And then this all requires ongoing commitment from recruitment teams, maintaining that engagement and just making sure that employees, are aware that it's part of the onboarding, that it's kept in mind throughout the process. So it's by no means easy, but there are some very realistic steps you can take to really get a huge amount more value from these programs, and kind of all of which we've built our program with, our platform with that in mind.
Yeah, and I think it's not just our platform. I think a key part of the way in which we approach things is through our customer success team, and the customer success team very much have built a methodology around these principles, and we work closely with our clients to essentially build something out of the principles, and it does work. We've seen the success from it. So we've got you some time back. That was shorter than half an hour. So hopefully that helps, and you can have lunch earlier. But we'd absolutely sort of love to tell you about sort of how we've taken these principles and we've adapted them in the build of our platform, but also used them in the sort of build of our customer success methodology to make referrals work, and give you some real life examples of how that's happened. Even if you just want to chat about what we've done from a methodology perspective and how we've adapted these principles to make referrals work, we'd be more than happy to do that. We produced a white paper on the psychology of referrals that Rich will be sort of circulating around over the next day or two. But as you can see, we've got our details on this slide, our email addresses and our LinkedIn connections, and we will, we'd be very, very happy to have a chat with you. But otherwise, thanks a lot for joining us today. Hopefully this was helpful. And as I said, any questions, please get in touch.